Welcome to the 1960s Project. The 1960s Project provides us with voices of the 1960s. In the 1960s Project, we've been recalling, remembering, reflecting on events that have influenced our lives. My name is Edie Paige, and I graduated from high school in 1965 from Germantown High School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Today, we begin season 3. The day is September 14th, and we'll have a show every other week through Tuesday, October 26th. Before I introduce today's guests, I have 4 asks of you. The first ask is to like and follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on LinkedIn. The third ask is to read and comment on our blogs. And the fourth ask is to share our stories, videos, and blogs. Our guest interviewer today is my sister, Faye Paige. She'll be interviewing her best friend from Germantown. Germantown is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her friend's name is Edie Paige. When we were growing up in Germantown, there were the Baton Street Paiges. That would include Faye and me and my siblings. And then there were the Duval Street Paiges. That would include Edie and her family. Both Faye and Edie graduated from Germantown High in 1967. They'll be sharing their thoughts, the tiny thoughts, and they'll be sharing their big memories. And we'll be holding conversations across generations. So let me now welcome Faye to the broadcast. Welcome, Faye.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be interviewing my very good friend, Edie Paige, Edith Courtney Paige. She has a very exciting family history. She descended from free people of color dating back to at least the 1700s, y'all. They was free in the 1700s. So that's 162 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. So the parents of Edie's grandparents, the greats, were free people of color. Now, Edie and I have a 60-year friendship. And so the friendship story of Faye Paige and Edie Paige began in Roosevelt Junior High School around 1960. And we only lived about 3 city blocks apart in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. We attended Germantown High, and we share the same last name, Paige, Paige. We have not been able to connect our family trees, not yet, but the genealogists are working on it. But clearly our friendship has been blessed by the ancestors. Now, y'all who know me know I have wanderlust. So I left the neighborhood. I left Philly, but Edie stayed and was married there. And when my parents moved, they only moved about a mile away. So over the years, it's just been really easy to maintain the connection, the Faye Edie connection, as well as our family connection. So Ty, let's bring up Edie.
Hi.
Hello, Edie. Now I am broadcasting from Boca Raton, Florida. And for all of you, that comes as a surprise, I've been a Floridian for 2 months now. Edie, where do you live?
I live in Germantown, PA, Philadelphia.
And which street do you live on?
I am back at the family house. I live on Duval Street. My family has been there for many, many years.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your street and the houses.
Well, Philadelphia is a very old city, one of the oldest, and my street is it's very small. It's one way. It's like an alleyway. You only park on one side of the street. If a car stops in the middle, you can't get past it. And so it's a very long, narrow street. It has a lot of houses on it. We have row houses. They're like, they call them townhouses now. These are houses that,
I guess they do.
yes, they do. And these are houses that share common walls. And so the houses are attached on both sides. And that makes up about a quarter of the street. And then the rest of the street, there's semi-detached houses, and they are also called twins, and they share one common wall.
Yeah. Duval Street is definitely a stereotypical historic Philadelphia street. You know, all that's missing is the cobblestones. Yeah. So, Edie,
right.
Who are you the daughter of?
I'm the daughter of Edith Pettiford, and I'm the daughter of William Paige.
Okay, so your mother is a Pettiford, your father is a Paige. So when we talk about Edie's ancestors, they are the Duval Street Pettiford Paiges. Now, I am the daughter of James and Nan Paige, and we're the Baton Street Paiges because we lived on Baton Street. And I'm going to give a little bit of Philadelphia history to just provide some context for our story. So Germantown is about 6 miles northwest of Center City, PA. And we often think of enslaved people as being associated with southern states. However, the start of Philadelphia relied very heavily on enslaved Africans. So how we get Philadelphia is William Penn and 100 Quakers stole the land from the indigenous Americans. And history says that 1 year later, 10 slave ships had arrived in Philadelphia. And this is important because Philadelphia is often associated with freedom. When I was a little girl, or in elementary school social studies, they teach you about the Liberty Bell. They tell you that Philadelphia is the home of the Quaker anti-slavery movement. But nobody told me that Philadelphia was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. So the Emancipation Proclamation happens in 1862. And our historian, leader, speaker, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote that in the late 1800s, such a short time after freedom, there was already a substantial class of Black entrepreneurs and leaders in Philadelphia. So, Edie, when Du Bois wrote that, had the Pettiford Paiges arrived in Philadelphia?
Well, actually, no. They were still in their hometowns. The Pettifords are in North Carolina, and the Paiges are still in Bowling Green, Virginia. But they're on their way.
They're on their way. And so they arrive in Philadelphia in the early 1900s that they arrive, and make their way to Duval Street. So now I'm going to jump from the early 1900s, when Edie's ancestors arrived, to the mid-1950s. Now, Wikipedia says that in the mid-1950s, Germantown, quote, experienced an influx of low-income African Americans, and, quote, resulting in a decline of property values and triggering white flight. So my family, Baton Street Paiges, that's where we show up. Obviously, this description by Wikipedia is racist. While, of course, there were low-wealth African Americans, my friends, me, Edie, everybody we knew was middle class, maybe lower middle class. And it was not our mere presence that caused a decline in property values. You all know the deal. It was caused by structural racism. And because at that time, many African Americans in Germantown were thriving and leading very upwardly mobile lives, as were our family. So Edie, tell us, we arrived in 1950s. Talk to me a little bit about when your family arrived.
Well, Germantown was the second stop for both of my families. The Pettifords arrived in Germantown in the 1900s, and the Pages arrived in the 1930s to DeVal Street. They had already both been in Germantown and other places.
Right. So they were very much part of the historical fabric of Germantown. Talk to me about their lives before DeVal Street.
My father's family, they lived in a more rural part of Germantown. That's located at the end of Rittenhouse Street, right on the edge of Fairmount Park. It's called Rittenhouse Town. And if you're familiar with the area, and they lived on a little farm. They had, they hunted and fished and grew their food and, raised fruit trees. And they, they lived this very rural life. They had a well and outdoor plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
And they really felt that when they moved to DeVal Street, they were moving on up.
Right. So the Thomases, your grandmother's people, they were free people of color dating back when?
I found records that show that they were free before the 1850s in Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And you can tell that because their names appear on the census.
On the census, okay.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they did not record enslaved people as full human beings or with their names. And what about the Pages and their history of being free people?
The Pettifords?
The Pages. Yeah. The Pages. When did they become free?
Oh, well, they became free. I have some records that show that they're free before the 1860s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your grandmother, Courtney Thomas, when did she move to Philly and where did she live?
She moved from Bowling Green, Virginia to a boarding house. And it was about a half a mile away from DeVal Street. Mm-hmm. And she worked as a maid. Mm-hmm. And there she ran into or met her homeboy, Aubrey Paige. Mm-hmm. And yes, homeboy. And she married him, and that's how they settled. They remained in Germantown.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of work did he do?
He was a truck driver.
He was
for a lumber yard. Yeah.
So again, gainfully employed. So what was most exciting, you think, for them about moving from the country to DeVal Street? What kind of amenities awaited them?
Yeah, I think it was very practical. They had indoor plumbing and they had central heating. Mm-hmm. And so, that was a big step up.
Yeah, I would want to do that. So in all of these discussions that you've had about being descendants of free people of color, do you have any documentation?
Yeah, for the Pettifords, there's a lot of documentation. For my great, I don't know how many great grandmothers, Hicksy Pettiford, she was born in 1820, and we have a marriage bond for her daughter, Amanda. And, they didn't create these records for enslaved people, so that's why we know that they were free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a story about the Pettiford brothers arriving, I think it's in some city in North Carolina.
Yes, there's a book written about free people of color. They're in several books. And they arrived in North Carolina in 1746, according to the book. And they were free Black men. They were probably descended from a free woman. That's how come they were free, who was probably a Native American or a white woman.
Okay. And how long has your grandfather, Pettiford, lived on Duval Street?
My grandfather, Pettiford, was actually born on Duval Street in his father's house. And my mother was born in that house too. My mother was born on Duval Street in 1918, which is over 100 years ago.
And so was that the only property that they owned?
No, my grandfather and his father, they owned various properties throughout Philadelphia and the suburbs.
Mm-hmm. So they were real estate people.
Yeah, I don't know how, but they were.
But they did it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that when these Pettiford brothers show up in 1746 in North Carolina, their mother may have been Native American. Do you have any documentation of your Native American ancestry?
Yes, I do. My mother always said that we were Pamunkey Indians, and they're part of the Powhatan Confederacy in Virginia. And so I took our oral history and submitted it to the tribe. And actually, my brother was granted membership in the 1990s.
That's proof. So both your parents grew up on Duval Street, and the Pettiford Pages were on Duval Street about 30 years before the Baton Street Pages show up. The Baton Street Pages, we along with several other families, we integrated, even though it was only a few blocks away, it was considered an all-white area. And you and I walked to Germantown High School every day. And the school, when we were there, it was about 50-50 integrated.
Mm-hmm.
School eventually transitioned to being all Black, and it is now closed. So you and I went to Germantown High. Your father's generation of Pages, did they attend Germantown High also?
Well, only my father's one of 8, and only the youngest brother attended Germantown High, but he didn't graduate. He dropped out and joined the service. The Paige girls, they didn't go to Germantown High. They felt that it was too racist and hostile. And so they walked every day to Gratz High School, which is in North Philly, about 3 miles away. And it was more integrated, and they felt that they were better received there. And they all graduated from high school.
Wow. So only one Paige attended Germantown High. Did any of the Pettifords attend Germantown High?
Yes, my mother, she attended Germantown High, and it was the closest school, and she experienced racism and hostility there from the teachers and from the students. And then she also, unfortunately, experienced colorism from the Black students. They called her light bright, and they called her Pocahontas. And they, just said things to demean her. So she did attend, but she never graduated.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was a good student, though. I remember you saying what a great student your mother was.
She was. She took the academic course, and she was prepared to go to college. But instead, right in her senior year, she dropped out, and she married my father. She thought that he lived on Duval Street. He was her best friend's brother. Mm-hmm. And she thought that he was a good catch. He had a steady job. He came from a good family. And she was right. They lived their entire lives together. And, she lasted only a year after he died.
Yeah, I remember them both well. So your mom could have gone to college. Your mother was a Pettiford. Did the Pettifords have a college tradition?
Yes, they did. My mother's aunt, Angelica, she went to Temple University, and she majored in education. she, in fact, was on DeVal Street in the 1920s, and at her brother's house. She lived there. And unfortunately, Temple didn't make any provisions for colored people to get their practice teaching in. And so I don't think she ever got her certificate.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So your mother worked outside of the home?
Well, when she was young, she was a maid, like almost everybody was. But, you know, Philly offered a lot of opportunities to work in, they had factories, or my parents called them mills. And so she joined my aunts working in the sewing and knitting mills. And, you know, they all found, I mean, the mills were open night and day. You could find steady work there.
Wow. Well, I remember how well your mother sewed. I remember all the beautiful dresses she made for you. I was jealous. I wanted to be my mother. But of course, it was just my teenage brain, because I too have a wonderful mother. But your mother, Big Edie, she was very, very special. So were the women in your family ever able to leave domestic and factory work?
Yes, all of my aunts, they all graduated from high school, and they aspired to get a good government job. That's what we were told to do. And so they did eventually get that opportunity. And when it arose, they took those jobs, and they, you know, left their aprons behind. They got off the floor, and they went and sat in offices, and you know, they were very happy to have that opportunity.
Yeah. So were the Pages, were you guys church-going people like the Bacon Street Pages?
Absolutely, absolutely. We started out as Baptists, but my grandmother, Courtney Paige, decided to move us to the Episcopal Church, St. Barnabas, across the street. She said that the Episcopalians were more prosperous. And so we moved over to that church, and they preached being prepared and opportunity would arise. And so we really adopted that philosophy. And in fact, it helped us to move into the middle class.
Wow. So the church helped you become more upwardly mobile by becoming Episcopalian.
Yes, it did.
It sounds upwardly mobile.
Yes.
So how did education help your family become financially stable?
Well, you know, whenever there was an opportunity, we tried to grab it, and Aunt Mickey in particular was always on the lookout. And so what she did was, when the Colored Y offered the opportunity, they started teaching classes in stenography. That's shorthand. It's out of date now. And so she took that, and her friend said, "Why would you do that? Because no one's going to hire a colored secretary." But in fact, she was prepared. And then Roosevelt desegregated the federal government. She applied, and she got herself her good government job with a better pay and better benefits and a pension.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Those good government jobs. Did she ever go to college?
Yes. In the 1960s, when her son was about to graduate high school, she took another chance, and she quit her good government job and went to Cheney University. Yeah, she was really brave. Yeah. She went to Cheney University. It's an HBCU about 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. She commuted every day on multiple buses, and she had a little job where she earned enough money to get car fare for the next day. And she graduated from Cheney when she was 46. And she became an elementary school teacher until she retired.
Wow, Aunt Mickey. So we've talked about the Pettiford College tradition, and Aunt Mickey. She
Yes.
went to college. Was Aunt Mickey the first Page to go to college?
No, she wasn't. She had an aunt, my great aunt Patty Beale, who also went to Cheyney University and was sponsored by the Quakers. Cheyney's a Quaker school. Yes. So she was not the first.
Yeah, yeah. I think I can remember when your great aunt Patty was honored for being the oldest living Cheyney graduate.
Yes, she was. We were very proud of her.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your family was free way before most of us. You were educated in integrated settings, which was not the case for many Black people. Your maternal grandfather drove a truck for the local lumber yard and was an entrepreneur. Your paternal grandfather owned several properties. And today, Aunt Mickey would absolutely be considered an example of Black girl magic.
Yes.
You know, the magic is in the determination, the hard work, and sacrifice, but she's definitely Black girl magic. What other sources of income made it possible for your family to be economically and financially stable?
Well, I had talked about the knitting mills, but there were also other kinds of factories in Philadelphia. And my father and his brothers, they worked as laborers in the steel mill. And that means that you just had the most menial, lowest paying jobs. You shoveled steel chips, you moved heavy objects. And so they were eking out a living doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, what happened is the opportunity arose, and my father befriended a white immigrant who I guess didn't know the unwritten rules, and he worked on piecework, and that means that you only get paid according to the pieces that you complete.
Uh-huh.
And so my father was interested in what he did. He was a lathe operator, and he showed my father how to do it. And then my father would work on the lathe when he took a lunch break. And so that helped him to get extra money because he completed more pieces.
Yeah.
And it also enabled my father to learn a skill.
Mm-hmm.
So opportunity arose. The company needed to hire more people. And the immigrant spoke up for my father and said that he knew how to operate the lathe. He was experienced. And he was hired, and he became a steel worker and joined the Steel Workers Union. And his brother also worked for the company. He became a carpenter and joined the Carpenters Union. And that really fueled the way for our family to get into the middle class.
Yeah, good government jobs and those good union jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So your father is friendly with a white immigrant at work. Did you have other kinds of contact with white immigrants?
Well, yeah, DeVal Street was full of immigrants from the South, and also white immigrants from various countries. And we were all very friendly. And, they even came to our house. Yeah, so we got along fine. This is during the 50s and even before I was born.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what was your childhood like on little, narrow, tiny DeVal Street?
DeVal Street, even though it was tiny, it had a ton of kids. We counted 62 at one point, and a lot of them were my relatives. And so it was raucous, and we were always having a good time, and you didn't have to make appointments to go and play with somebody.
No play dates were required. And your grandma Paige lived on that block, right?
Yeah, so we would go to grandmom's house on Sundays and for the holidays. And she had a semi-detached house, and she had a patio in the back with peach trees. And so we would go there, and, the aunts would can peaches and make delicious peach upside down cake. And the kids, we would hand crank that ice cream that took forever, and you'd get a little bit, and the uncles and my father, they, for fun, they kept up their hunting and fishing. And so if they were lucky enough to bag a deer, they would come home and hang it from the peach tree. And we would all go over there, and while they dressed it, and, we would just do whatever we had to do to process this food, because we actually ate it too. And so I was the one that was in charge of plucking the pheasants.
You plucked pheasants. I love
I
that.
did.
That imagery of little Edie plucking pheasants. I did not know you had that talent.
Yeah.
So, you have this street with this family full with all this love. Is very picture book-ish. We often think of the Huxtables as this tight-knit, smart, loving family, but they're fictional. And we know just how fictional they are. And the Paiges are the real deal. Now, my life as a Baton Street Paige was also filled with love and family, but it was filled with a lot of work. Ask any of my siblings, and they will tell you we can't remember when we did not work. And my youngest sister, Kathy, she tells a story of knowing when the inspectors came, she knew she was supposed to disappear because she was too young to work in the family business. So even though we weren't immigrants, our story is very immigrant-y. So at different times, we owned different businesses. So I'm going to try and get my hands up here. So imagine that this is Duval Street. Let me get my hand in the camera. And this is where Edie lives, on Duval Street. Well, right here, Germantown Avenue is the cross street. And this is where our businesses were. So just to kind of give you a an idea of the close proximity. And we owned a barber shop at one time, sandwich shop, convenience store. And we weren't unusual. There were many, many Black businesses in the area. On the same block, there was the Rib Crib, the hardware store was across the street, the cleaners was there, the beauty parlors, there was a travel agency. So again, we just didn't fit that Wikipedia description of these really, really poor people whose presence would cause property values to diminish. So Edie, what is Duval Street like today, now that you are back home?
Well, Duval Street, it has gone through many transitions. And in the 50s, it transitioned from being integrated to being entirely Black by the 60s. And now, gentrification has come to Germantown. And so it's changing again. We currently have about 5 families on the street, and they're also very present throughout the neighborhood.
5 gentrification families?
5 white families, yeah. And they're very chatty. They're too chatty for me. And so it's really undergoing another change. All of the old people are gone.
Are they visible in the businesses?
They are quite visible in the businesses. In fact, right across the street from where your family owned your businesses, on the opposite corner, there's it used to be a moving and storage company,
Yes,
and now it's a craft brewery.
A craft brewery. Yeah, well,
Yes,
you don't have to tell me who is showing up en masse for the craft brewery. I can
absolutely, absolutely. They're very loyal customers.
imagine. So you have so much interesting, important family and neighborhood history that you've been sharing. Have you always been the family historian?
Well, it was me and my aunts, and of course Aunt Mickey.
I'm
And
Nikki.
yes, yes. And so we would gather stories and talk about it because we were always together. And we also had a few family reunions. The last big one was in the 80s. And lately we've been having, before COVID, we were having an annual family picnic.
Okay. Do you participate in any of the historical activities in Germantown?
Well, I really love Germantown. It's one of the nation's first suburbs, and it has some of the oldest architecture in the country. And so I'm always looking. We have festivals. We have a Juneteenth celebration, and so I'm always looking for activities around Germantown, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah. Any activities with historical societies or anything like that?
Well, years ago with Aunt Mickey, yes, we went to the Bluebell Hillers Association, which is where they started, when they lived in the more rural part of Germantown. It's called Bluebell Hill. And so we went there, and they were talking about the history of the area. And so I asked if there were any Black people in the area. And the historian said, oh, no, there were no Black people in the area before 1950. And of course, Aunt Mickey then had to talk about her history. And after that, when we would go back to the meetings, the historian would literally jump over chairs to come and sit beside Aunt Mickey and learn some more.
I bet.
Yes.
I bet. So, when did you know that your history was different from my history and probably most of the other Black families that live on Duval Street?
Well, like I said, we had 62 children, and during the summer, a lot of them disappeared. They went south, and they, went to grandparents' houses, and they worked on farms, and, they rode horses. And we never did that. And so I realized that, we did not have this Southern connection that they all did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, do you have any special Faye and Edie memories from our high school years?
Well, I remember, and this was, I think, before high school, we used to go to Freedom School, and that was out of Germantown in North Philly. We took several buses, and we went there to learn like nonviolent protest strategies and about Black history. And they were preparing us to go on the freedom rides in the 60s.
Well, let me just say there is no way that Nan and James was going to let Faye go on a freedom ride. And Faye was not personally brave enough to go against her parents. So we didn't even go to the March on Washington. Did you go?
Well, I thought I was going to go. There was so much excitement. Everybody was making signs, of course, led by Aunt Mickey. And, as they're loading up the cars to go, I run in my house to grab a few things. And my mother says, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to the march. She says, oh, absolutely not. You're staying right here. No, my parents didn't allow me to go, and nor did they allow me to go, of course, on the freedom rides.
So when we graduated from Germantown High in 1967, it was very integrated, almost 50-50. And we were friends. I mean, friendly enough with the white students. We often partied with them. But then you went off to very white Temple University there in Philadelphia. And I went to an HBCU, Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania. What was your Temple experience like?
Well, like you said, Temple was a PWI, a primarily white institution. And I experienced hostility like I never did before. I was very used to moving in integrated settings. So I felt very isolated. And at one point, I was in one of those, I call them the weeder outer classes. You know, it's huge. And the professor calls on me, the only Black woman in the classroom, and he asked me, how do the colored people feel about what's going on, you know, because the civil rights movement was happening. And, you know, I stood up and told him I didn't have a chance to speak to all the colored people on the way to school this morning. Yeah, it was a very racist environment.
Yeah. Were you a commuter student or did you stay on campus?
I was a commuter student, and you know, I was looking for a place to belong. So I joined this new group that was starting on campus, the Black Panthers, and
like you do. Okay.
and you know, I wasn't really part of their planning or strategy meetings, but I recruited for them because I was cute at the time.
What? You're still cute. For the record. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about kind of your time with the Panthers and how you felt about it.
Well, you know, I felt that they were doing good work, and they were, with their feeding programs and just, you know, increasing awareness and pride in being Black. But eventually, I mean, and this is later on in the 60s, I mean, they killed, you know, Bobby Hutton and Fred. Yeah. And I just realized that that's not, you know, the way I wanted to live. And so, you know, I didn't stay very active with them for very long.
Yeah, they killed Martin Luther King around that time as well.
Yeah, when I was at Temple, they killed King, and it was devastating. I saw them pull out tanks on Broad Street. Broad Street is like the major thoroughfare through Philadelphia, and Temple is located in a Black neighborhood. And so they pulled out the tanks in order to allow the white students to leave the dorms. And some of the white students actually approached me and tried to bribe me to walk them to the train because they thought that somehow I could protect them. And I told them to call their daddy like I had called mine.
So did you graduate from Temple?
No, I never really went back to school after they killed King. I really couldn't handle it. And so then life intervened. I got married. I had children. I got divorced. And all this time I was working full time. And I started going to school at night. And I eventually graduated from Penn at age 46, the same age that Aunt Mickey did.
46, just
46.
like Aunt Mickey.
Yeah.
Wow. So where's Aunt Mickey today?
Well, Aunt Mickey lived to be 84, and she was the matriarch of our family after Grandmom died. And her favorite thing to do was to go, she went to all of the graduations, and of course there were a lot of us, so there were a lot of graduations. And, yes, and the high point of her life was, even though she was in a wheelchair, she went to my brother Joey's graduation when he got his doctorate in education.
Dr. Joey Paige, little Joey Paige. So you are now a retired educator. You are a criminal justice activist. Why don't you share with us a little bit about how you spend your time these days?
Okay, well, I'm a genealogist. I get really excited when I get a match on Ancestry.com. My son has been falsely convicted of a crime, and so I work on his case almost every day. I also, as a result of that, I've joined the Germantown Hub for Justice, where we help neighbors that have been in contact with the police. You know, that happens all the time. We make sure that they get an attorney, and we teach them about the criminal justice system, how it works, and we even escort them to court.
Right.
Yes.
It looks like somebody cares about them too.
Yes, and the neighbors care. It's important that the neighborhood participate in this instead of just being victims.
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, I'm a foodie, and so I love to eat out and find the best restaurants.
And I have had so many wonderful culinary experiences because you are definitely my favorite foodie.
Thank you. And I love, you know, Germantown's rich in the arts, and I love live music, particularly jazz.
Yeah.
So we do that too.
Well, growing up, I think you will agree, we had really a good time. It sounds like you're still having a good time. Any thoughts about how you now process our childhood memories since you stayed and you've been there on Germantown and back on Duval Street?
Well, I realized that we came of age at a golden time. You know, we grew up in a really nice neighborhood. There were so many activities for us. The skating rink, we had dances. There were tons of movies.
Yeah.
Yes, and so it was just, and also we received a good education from Germantown High.
We did, yes, we did.
We really did. I mean, Germantown then. The school was a powerhouse. We had about 4,000 students enrolled. We had almost 1,000 in our graduating class. And many of those kids went to college and finished.
Most everyone we know went to college or to a good government job or to some kind of career. Absolutely.
And now, unfortunately, you know, Philadelphia has hit the skids. Germantown High, before it closed, it had less than 1,000 students, maybe even less than 500. It was named one of the national dropout factories. And of course, this is because of intentional lack of funding that's just been going on habitually for decades. Mm-hmm. And also, the city has now been named the poorest large city in the country.
Wow, you know, I think of Newark, I think of St. Louis, where I used to live. I think of Detroit. Right. I did not think of Philadelphia with that lens. But wow, the story of Edie Paige, the story of the Duval Street Pettiford Paiges, the story of the Baton Street Paiges. Wow, this is all very nostalgic for us. These are such important stories. And then, of course, Aunt Mickey.
Yes.
Such a powerful example of the importance of knowing who you are and how the ancestors guide us. So, you know, it's kind of like I feel Aunt Mickey's little shoulder here going, yeah, y'all did good. Y'all did good. So thank you so much for sharing this time with me. And I look forward to eating with you and hearing some music in a few months when I'll be back in Philly.
Okay, see you soon, Faye.
Hey, Edie, thank you very much. I'll have to come up and hang out with you.
Anytime you're in.
We didn't do it as when I was growing up, but maybe we can start it now. So thank you very much.
Okay. You're
Great
welcome.
story, great information. Where is the book in the making?
Maybe the Edie and Faye story.
Well, or the Edie and Faye story, or the story of the DeVal Street, that unit block. It was just basically one block long, unit block of DeVal Street, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So it
One
was between Germantown Avenue and what was the next street over?
Cherokee.
So it was between. So it's a history of one block. Which we have a couple historians on this link. So we're gonna badger you until it gets written. But yeah, okay. The rich history in terms of genealogy, and Faye, we have free people going back to 1789 now.
Oh, I know, but it's too hard to weave that into the story.
Shadrach Palmer purchases his freedom. Mm-hmm. Palmer's would be on my mother's maternal side. Shadrach Palmer purchased his freedom, and then he turned around and purchased his wife's freedom. So this is all in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So we have, and due to the genetic testing, we go back to even be able to trace that back to Africa. And I'm having a senior moment, and maybe O'Kelly can chime in and tell us which country that we go back to. I want to say the Congo, but I don't know.
No, that's not Nigeria crew. We're Nigerian, and the crew people.
Okay. Oh no, but for Shadrach Palmer.
Oh, for Shadrach Palmer, no, we need Kel to chime in for that one.
Yeah, and then bringing us to show the different waves of migration. In the fact that your people were early people in Germantown, being rural, and when I never knew Rittenhouse. I never knew Rittenhouse Street as being rural, so you can see where we're talking about the hunting and the fishing. Yes, Shadrach Palmer goes back to Gabon, so yeah, and then the different waves. And Faye recounted our migration story. And I hadn't really thought about it as an immigrant story, but thank you, Faye, for that. That helped me frame my experience. Maybe that's why we were working so hard.
Work like immigrants.
Yeah, and then the successive waves of change, and now seeing Germantown being gentrified is quite phenomenal along that corridor there. And so what a story. Thank you, Faye, for the interview, and thank you, Edie. I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and also invite you to like our blogs and provide comments. Also invite you to share your thoughts, your tiny thoughts and your big memories. If you'd like to join us and be on and talk about your life, feel free. We'd love to have as many voices of the 1960s as possible. And again, join us 2 weeks from now, and then every other Tuesday after that, 5 until October 24th, so that we can continue our voices from the 1960s.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll be back for the next session.
You'll be back for the next two sessions.
Well, that's two. Well, but the next one, I'll be interviewing my friend Marilyn French Hubbard, and actually she's been on the program before, and this time she has a doctorate in metaphysics.
Yes.
And so we're going to be talking about metaphysics.
And we're going to do a joint interview on that one, because I want to get in on that conversation.
Well, I need some help because you know more about metaphysics than I do. Okay.
Okay. Good night, everybody, and thank you very much.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.